Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of Dispatches. I'm your host, Brady Kreitzer. Today, our guest is singer, songwriter, and musician Andrew Scott Wills of the band Hawken. His new album, Fringes of Freedom, comes out on May 22nd. Andrew, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Brady, for having me. I love the podcast. Long-time listener.
Excellent. So, Scott, if you could, tell us a little bit about who you are, about your background.
Yeah, I grew up in Ohio, east of Dayton, Ohio, and it's a historically rich place when it comes to the American frontier. I grew up literally a stone's throw from the Little Miami River, which is the same river that the great Shawnee Tecumseh was born on, and just 12 miles south of where Simon Kenton is buried. I came by it honestly. I just grew up breathing in frontier history, and it became an obsession, and then you start, you see Davy Crockett and Daniel Boone and all these shows on TV, and it took hold of me. I then also, when I was about 15, started playing the guitar, and music became a big part of my life. And after several years of just moving around for my wife's job, we ended up in Nashville, and I am today a professional singer, songwriter, and I write for other people. And anyway, but that passion for the American frontier history never left me. If anything, it got stronger as I've aged. So those are my two loves, music and American history.
Well, you do a great job at both. Now, I could ask you how you came to music, but anyone who's ever heard your music knows you're a wonderful performer, musician, singer, songwriter. Let's talk about Hawken a little bit. That is not something you see very often, especially for very accomplished musicians, this idea of really latching on to history of all things. And I can say personally, having listened to your stuff, I mean, it's as enlightening sometimes as reading a book or an article for sure. So tell us a little bit about how Hawken came together.
Yeah, I'm a big outdoorsman. I do a lot of hunting and fishing, and I was on a road trip for deer season, and I was driving by myself to northern Wisconsin, and it was like a 14-hour drive. And this was right after right after 2020, and the whole world had kind of changed, and I was just driving thinking about my career and writing songs for other people, and I just was like, I wish I had control of my own songs, and I could write what I really want to write. And along that drive, I came up with this idea of making music about my other love, American history. And so the name Hawken actually came to me because the first song I wrote was about a Rocky Mountain fur trapper. The song's called Free. And so Hawken Horse stands for the two most important things for a trapper heading west, is his Hawken rifle and his horse. Mm-hmm. And so that was the birth of Hawken, and it all, was birthed from my love of American history. And so I put out that first self-titled record, and it was so well received. I got a lot of press. I got, a lot of, podcast interviews out of that first record. And then I released my next record called Long Hunter, which dove more into the East and kind of where it all started for me. Simon Kenton, Daniel Boone, that Revolutionary War era fringes of freedom, which kind of leads to my upcoming record. So Hawken is really an outlet that was combining my two loves. It was American history, specifically frontier history, and in music. So that's where Hawken came from.
So anyone who watches this show, Andrew, knows where I stand on the Revolution. You know, I focus a lot of my work on the Western theater of the Revolution, Western Pennsylvania, Western Virginia, Kentucky, Ohio. I know the answer to this, but how do you think we should think about that particular region during the Revolution? You talk about your new album, Fringes of Freedom.
Mm-hmm.
It was as much a part of the Revolution as Boston or Philadelphia. What would you say to people who say, "Oh, I've never heard of that before"?
To me, it is the most interesting, exciting part of the entire era. Like it's because it is. I mean, we talk about the United States as a melting pot. That was the ultimate clash of cultures. You had the French to the north and to the west. You had the Spanish all the way to the south. You had the British and all the, not just British, but all the European Anglo folks on the colonies, and then you had all the Native Americans, and it was a fascinating time in history because there was obviously this strife between the crown and the colonists, but then there was this power grab thing with the French from the north and the natives trying to figure out how they fit into all this and who should they side with. I'm obsessed with that side of it, but also when you pour that all into virgin forest of just wilderness and eastern buffalo, things you can hardly imagine these days. It's just absolutely fascinating to me, and it really shaped what the United States is today a lot more than the Eastern Seaboard would even realize.
Well said. Well, Andrew, we look at for example, some of your albums, your music. You say you moved to Nashville. That's going to give people maybe an idea of your style, but I would argue this is not just a country and Western style that you're taking on. How would you describe your musical approach, if you would?
Yeah, it's not an easy answer. The streaming services, they don't even know what I am, really. They haven't figured me out. Some people have called it like acoustical country. A lot of people call it Americana. I think purely it's more folk. That's because what you're singing about is what makes it folk. But I professionally write country and bluegrass, so you can kind of figure out, musically where I come from. But Hawken Horse is a little different. It's not got steel guitars in it. It's not it's not very formulaic. But I would call it folk. I've developed this term over the past couple of years. I've been calling it frontier folk.
Yeah.
And just to help kind of put a label on what I do. There's not many people who do that. I don't know if you've heard of Pete Kosky, but he is a folk artist out of West Virginia, and he's done some amazing ballads about the Eastern Frontier, and he comes more from a bluegrass side of things, but he's somebody I really look up to. But frontier folk is what I would describe it as. It's very acoustic driven. I dive into some of my stuff has strings on it, like orchestral, pieces, and but I don't. This is not like your modern pop music. This is not like Blake Shelton or any of that stuff. This is very stripped down, organic, and a lot of my fans really they love the tone of it because it's not like in your face, I guess.
Mm-hmm. I think about some of the great country music that's coming out, and there's always a lot of emotion involved. I think about being a songwriter sometimes. Sometimes it just comes right from your soul. But what I love about your music is it's one thing to write the song, but you have to research to write these songs. You're half historian, half musician. Could you talk about maybe your research approach, how important research is to you? Because you can't just start writing. There's a point where you have to do a lot of reading, I imagine, first.
Absolutely. Um, there's two sides to that. Half of my fan base I would consider historians anyway, so they're going to
Mm-hmm.
call me out on anything that I'm getting wrong. So that's in the back of my mind at all times, is I got to get this right. And I also got to do justice to this iconic story, is in the back of my mind as well. Um, and the other side of it is I realize a lot of my listeners, this might be the first and only time they're ever exposed to this iconic story. They're probably not, reading the latest, David McCullough book or whatever. They just like, oh, this is a cool song. And they're passive, historians maybe. But I have this weight on my shoulders that this might be the only time they ever hear about this. And so I want to make it cool, and I want them to like it, but I also want to sneak the facts in there so that they're getting it right, So there's a lot of research. I read a lot of books. I have very few fiction books in my library. I'm sure a lot of the listeners of this podcast can relate to that. I just I love nonfiction history books, and when I was preparing for my upcoming record, I read Swamp Fox by John Aller, and I reread Boone by Robert Morgan. I've really dove into some good reads. I'm not a fast reader. I'm a slow reader, so it takes me time because I'm like reading a page and I stop. I'm like, wow. And then I'm having to research what I just read. So it's like a long, daunting read. And my wife's like, you're still reading that book? I'm like, oh yeah,
Well,
I'm
you're
over
doing it
here.
the right way, by the way. That's how you should be reading a history
I'll
book.
keep diving. Yes. 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 So there's a lot of research that goes into my music, mostly because I want to get it right. And I just feel the pressure of, not leading people astray or making things up. Some of my songs are more romantic and more, you know, not historically based songs, but I still want the furniture to be historically correct. I want to talk about correct things in the correct era, even if it's a made up song. So, but if I'm writing a song about, Francis Marion, I want the facts to be right, So it's lots of research, like you said.
I love one of the things I love about your approach is that we have all these chances now. A lot of people think they don't like history. We just have to reach them where they are. And sometimes it's a song, sometimes it's a YouTube video. So that's exactly what, we should be doing, is meeting people where they are to make it easy for them. So Andrew, let me ask you this. We'll do a little bit of a deep historical dive here. If you would have visited the frontier or anywhere in colonial America over the last 300 years, you're going to find a person, with a banjo or a guitar in their hand. That's got to sort of be a connection for you. But music's different today. So I guess let me ask, aside from people playing instruments, how has music changed in 300 years? Has it changed the way we use it? Has it changed what we try to do with it? These men aren't trying to make millions of dollars. They're picking on a mountainside somewhere in Kentucky. How do you feel about that? How's it different now?
It's definitely different, and it's the same. It's interesting. In some ways, I think the importance of music back then, it was a little more, I don't know, it was held in a higher standard because life was rough. You're planting crops, you're harvesting, you're you're trying to keep your cattle fed. There's potential, danger around every corner. It was a stressful life on the frontier. And so music was kind of an escape. And so I look at it as kind of like your lock screen on your phone or your screensaver on your computer. It's usually something. It's somewhere you want to be. It's a beach. It's your family. It's something you love. It's somewhere you know that makes you happy. Well, in the same way, music, back then tended to be happy, lively, funny. They really liked things that made you laugh because it was an escapism tool. And I think we do the same thing today. Like we listen to music that makes us feel good, whether it's Bon Jovi and we're driving down the road on Friday, or we're, listening to a Hawken horse, listening to, a song about a long hunter. It's an escape, and it's putting you in a mood and a place, where you want to be. So I think that is the same. Music, I think today is a little more disposable.
Mm-hmm.
It's just kind of like on to the next, on to the next. Back then, songs, like today, like you'll have a hit song on the top of the Billboard charts that'll be like a 2-week, 3-week number one. Back then, a song was timeless. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
a melody in particular would just last for decades and decades and decades, and they would just change the words because it was a way of communicating. Especially when you have this culture clash of all these different people. Well, music is a language that has no barriers because we all just identify with a melody. It's powerful. So even if it's an instrumental piece, it's a uniting thing to play music. And it's funny. I just imagine like you said, some guy in Kentucky up on a hillside, playing a fiddle or something. He probably didn't even have to be a very good player. He might have been terrible, but it would have probably been a magical experience for
Yes.
anybody. Just, wow, it reminds me of home. It reminds me of family back across, in England or wherever. So, I think music's the same, but it's different.
Yeah. Well, you have a new album coming out on May 22nd. Fringes of Freedom appears to have a very revolutionary bend to it. Could you tell us about one of those songs you think is especially appropriate for the 250th anniversary, like a great story we could have to look forward to on that album?
Story wise, there's a couple on there that I'm excited to, real excited about. I have one that I've been putting off for a long time because I've been intimidated by it, but I have a song about the siege of Boonesboro during the
Mm,
Revolution, and
that's a tough
um,
topic.
it's tough. It's tough writing a song about a battle. So there's action happening, there's subplots happening, like Simon Kenton, or Butler as he was known at the time, saving Daniel Boone's life. All this is happening, and I'm trying to tell the story. It's one I've been wanting to work on for years, and sometimes songs happen, they just fall out of the sky, and then sometimes they have to kind of sit in a crock pot for a couple months or years. And that's one I'm really excited about. It's about the whole battle, and there's several songs I'm excited about, story wise. I also have one called "Fear the Long Knife" that I think people are going to really like. Um, this is the first Hawken Horse record that I literally considered, should I put a explicit symbol on my album, because it's about war, and I didn't want. I have a lot of kids who listen to Hawken Horse. 7, 8, 9-year-old kids who just love Hawken Horse, and I thought about it. I was like, there's no, you know, crazy language or anything, but it's just the topic is war. And so I hemmed and hawed about it and did some research and called some people in the industry, and they're like, nowadays that doesn't even mean anything. That just putting that just makes it mean that you put out a rap record at this point. So it doesn't really carry the weight that it once did. So anyway, it's a heftier album for sure.
We think a song about a battle would be a tough sell, but I can tell you, and people of a certain age will know this, my father-in-law still sings Johnny Horton in the Battle of New Orleans to this day.
Yes.
And what is that? But what you're talking about, right? It's a song about a battle. Yep. So the frontier is kind of explicit. I've had that whenever I write. You put in a primary source of a story, and it's so brutal, but you're not. I feel like I'm not doing anyone any favors leaving it out, essentially. So
absolutely.
All right. So let me ask you this, Andrew. As you're writing, as we're listening, do you ever think about, what are you teaching people about these early settlers? Obviously, it's what you're learning too. We learn so that we can teach. What do you think we can learn about the early frontier from your music?
Yeah, I think that it's still kind of a mystery a little bit. I mean, I kind of want people to learn that they can, research this stuff. It's fascinating what we have at our fingertips these days. Mm-hmm. I mean, just 20, 30 years ago, you had to drive to a library and physically look at these books. But now so much of this stuff is just available.
Yes.
From your keyboard. It's insane. And, so that's some of what I wanted to do, like with some of my songs, is I want to tell stories that you've never heard before, like I've had so many people say, oh, you should recut Davy Crockett, King of the Wild Frontier. And I'm like, hey, everybody's heard that.
I would be here for it. I would be number one on my list.
You never know. I probably will at some point. Daniel Boone was a man. But I wanted to tell some of the unsung heroes. There's for every Daniel Boone or Francis Marion, there was 1,000 Billy Bobs that we never talk about, and they had their own story. And so that's really what I want people to realize is there's history is deep and broad. There's so much to it, and you can dig in, and you don't have to stop on a Wikipedia page. Like, you can keep going. Keep going. Yeah. You could buy a Brady Kreitzer book or something.
Well, first of all, thank you for that. But Andrew, you have a new album coming out. We're going to put a link to it, to your site, in the show notes. Tell us where we can find your stuff.
Yeah, you can stream and download anywhere you listen to music: Apple Music, Spotify, Amazon, Pandora, all that stuff. If you want a CD, you can go to hawkenhorse.com, and I've got CDs and vinyls and other stuff there. I'm hard to miss on social media. If you just type in Hawken Horse, I pop right up, and I got a blue check mark. So I post a lot of historic artwork by people that I'm real inspired by, and some of which are friends of mine. And I'm a pretty good follow, I think. So
excellent. I would agree. I would endorse that. Well, Andrew Scott Wills, Hawken Horse, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Brady.